Hello and welcome to the next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, don't know about you, but I've frequently been in the situation where I think I need to find people to do stuff for me, but end up doing it myself, because by the time I teach those people how to do what I want, it would have been quicker to do it, and probably end up never getting rid of stuff that I should do.
Is this Help Kevin Appleby hour or something? What's going on here? Well, it does sound like we need somebody who's an expert in this area to help you, Kevin. Never been a problem for me. No, actually, it's a problem I've recognised as well. So today we've got somebody who's called Alexis Kingsbury, who has a business called Air Manual. And you can find out more about Air Manual at airmanual.co. But today, Alexis, welcome to the next 100 Days podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, chaps. It's great to be here.
So, well, Alexis, you must tell us something about yourself.
Sure. So I've been, I guess, an entrepreneur in various forms for, I think it's around 2 decades now. I started early. I know I look young. So I did start early when I was sort of 11, 12, 13 years old. And in fact, it makes me realize it's been over 2 decades. Okay, it starts to make me feel old. I started young, and I would start business after business, like washing cars, sweeping drives, selling newsletters, selling headsets. Then even while at university, building computers, selling them to local businesses. I always had that passion for wanting to build a successful business. That was something that I found so exciting that I thought, right, I could really dedicate my career to this, but found it really hard. And exactly as you guys were just saying, the problem for me was delegating. It was, how do I make this business not just me? And over and over with each of those little businesses that I started, I would get busy, end up not being able to grow it, couldn't work out how to make it, how to bring in other people and make that work and delegate. And as a result would decide, maybe it's the product or service. Maybe that's the problem. So I'd stop that business and start another one and another one and another one. I think I got up to about 8 before deciding instead to become a management consultant, where I started working with really large businesses like AstraZeneca and Honda and BP and UK government, learning how do they deliver at scale, because clearly I hadn't worked out the answer. And it was there that I learned it's about people and processes. It's about, yes, you need to bring in people, but you also need to give them the guidance to be successful in their role and be able to take these things on. And so it's a problem that I struggled with for a huge amount of my career. And even after that insight, I didn't solve the problem truly for another probably 7 years, because I think, and I think there are so many other business owners that have this challenge where, exactly as you say, they feel like it'll take longer to delegate than it will for me to do myself, or no one else can do this except me, or whatever it is, those thoughts that mean that ultimately you don't let go of the things that you need to do. So that's kind of where I was as my early stage journey. But fortunately, I did manage to overcome it. Now have multiple successful businesses, large global teams serving over 500 organizations around the world, including well-known brands like 3M and PwC and Swarovski and Pepsi and so on. But I couldn't have got there without making some big changes to the way that we're running the business.
Alex, what's the secret?
The secret. So I think the mistake I made first was that I was firstly terrified of hiring. Like when I was a management consultant, I was really good at being a consultant. I was good at taking complex problems, summarizing them and playing them back effectively to the client. But a manager I had told me that I'd never be good at managing people for a variety of reasons. And unfortunately, I believed him. And so when I went off to start my own businesses, thinking, okay, well, I still want to build my own businesses, but perhaps I'll do it without having to rely on people, or perhaps I will avoid managing them because clearly I'm not going to be good at that. And so that was really the first mistake I made, is avoiding hiring, because absolutely, to grow your business, once you've worked out what works, like if you've got a product that delivers really real value, and you can describe that value and you can get other people to buy from you, now you're on track to start being able to delegate. And I made the mistake of holding back on doing that too early. And so that was the first problem. The second problem was that then I was worried that what would I know? Like they're the experts. I'm bringing them in. Like I hired this is really bad. Like I hired a salesperson who had done £1 million of revenue in the previous year for a similar product from a software business for a different software business that I had at the time and still have, SpiderGap. And we brought him in. He'd done £1 million worth of revenue. So I thought, fantastic. Like he can come into my business, get me £1 million of revenue a year, and we are just going to absolutely go for our 10-year targets. And after a few weeks and a few months, like he wasn't even getting the results that I'd been getting, kind of doing part-time on sales, never mind being on track for hitting these amazing results that he'd had elsewhere. And it was really frustrating because what I thought I'd done was the right answer, which was I've brought in someone with loads of experience. And then I've empowered them to say, look, you're the expert. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. Like it's, you bring all of that. And he confidently went, yeah, that's great. And off he went. But the reality is I didn't have the processes. I didn't have the collateral. I didn't have the guidance in place so that he could sell in the way that I'd already proven would be successful to sell it. And so that was the next mistake that I made, is not giving that guidance so that he could do a good job. And then the third mistake I made was that when we then, on a subsequent hire, when we did solve that, because again, I was holding back from managing, and because I thought, I won't be very good at one-to-ones. I'm not very good at asking people, how are you? And what's going on with the family, and remembering that stuff. And so I held back from it. And as a result, team members didn't stay, or at least a particular key team member, a salesperson who were getting the results. They didn't really feel engaged, empowered, supported, and as a result, handed in their notice after just 11 months. And that kind of cycle is really, really painful. Like I gloss over it there, but every time we had a failed hire or a misstep like that, it easily cost us multiple tens of thousands of pounds, probably into six figures. And partly as a result, costs us months or even years in terms of our goals and what we're trying to grow as the business. And then personally, like in terms of lost sleep and stress and impact on relationships with, the people that we love, it creates strain in those. And so that's why it's now something I'm really passionate about, showing other business leaders how to do this, because it isn't something that I came naturally to. It is something you can learn, and it's more about putting the right processes in place so that this stuff is easy, rather than expecting yourself to be the best manager the world's ever seen.
That's a really important point. The idea is it is something you can learn, and there are some steps that you can take. Now, we don't have a long time, but we do have a lot of interest in what those steps might be. What are they?
Yeah, so I'd say that if we kind of roll it back to when you're first in a position where you need to delegate, the temptation is to, as you say, as we said earlier, is to think, it'll take longer to train someone else to do this than if I just do it myself. And so you end up forever caught in that trap. So the first thing that we found is that when business leaders are trying to hand over work or trying to kind of document their business, sort out their processes, whatever way they're thinking about it, often they set the scale of that problem so big. Like they think, yes, I need to document my whole business. And as a result, they then put that off forever, right? Because it's like, let's say that you're a business owner who has worked out how to sell your product, and you've worked out that actually a particular source of your best leads and prospects and so on perhaps comes from engaging in particular online communities, maybe going via LinkedIn, finding the right people, sending them a message, then following up with some content, then following up with a phone call, and then using that call to book in a discovery call and so on. So you've worked out like, oh, I can do this. The problem is that now you're just absolutely maxed out to the point that you're not even going to get the time to go on LinkedIn to go and do these things. Now, the mistake is thinking, right, I need to document the whole process, end to end, all of this, and then try and hand it over to someone. And of course, what they tend to do is we'll go, oh, how am I going to find someone that's really good at doing all the LinkedIn stuff that I do, and really good at putting together content, writing good messages, and can then do the proactive calls, and can then do the discovery call and convert that person to a sale. And they go, I need to hire a mini me. Like I need to find like a clone of me. And the reality is they're either not out there or they are too expensive for you to hire. Like at
that stage, it's definitely at that stage, and you're probably the first thing's right, probably not out there. So, what was the answer, or is the answer?
You have to break it down. You have to go smaller. Like I was talking to an owner of a printing business who, when I first started talking to him, he said, "Look, Alexis, I'm working 60-hour weeks. And I know I shouldn't be. It's damaging my relationships, damaging my health. I don't want to do it anymore, but I have no idea where to start. It just all feels too big." So I said, well, where are you spending your time currently? And we identified a few activities. One was sending quotes to customers. So people asking for a quote on a print job, and he has to respond with, okay, here's what it would cost. And because of the way that business had developed and they'd kind of had to expand their product line, that was not a trivial task. It'd become quite complex, and so he was the bottleneck. He was the only person that could do it.
Oh, right.
And so we said, well, okay, let's take that. How long is that taking us? And he said 3 hours per day. So that's 15 hours per week on this one thing, sending quotes to customers. So he said, look, I know, Alex, I know what I'm meant to do. The books tell me, like, document and delegate. I need to pass it over to other people. But I just haven't found the time. I figure it would probably take me about 8 hours to do, and I just haven't found the time. Now, of course, 8 hours to get 15 hours per week back should be worth it anyway. But he's already working 60-hour weeks and hadn't even worked out that was the thing to delegate or how. So I said, well, we've got 45 minutes left of this call. Let's see what we can do. And so we literally documented, okay, what are the high level steps involved in preparing a quote? Do this, do that, prepare, turn it into this PDF, send it to customer. Great. Okay, now add in the detail for where it's tricky or where there's logic. Like, how are you calculating the line item pricing? Are you using the catalog? Are you adding some kind of profit margin to it? When do you add that in the process, and so on? So we went through that and added the detail, and then we added some warnings for high impact or common mistakes that can be made. And we got to a point where it's like, okay, that could be followed, by me, not in his business. I could follow that and come up with the pricing. And so the next step is then we arranged, and by the way, all of that took less than 30 minutes. And then the next stage was we arranged a call with his account managers. But of course, even if he hadn't had employees at that stage, you could then be talking about maybe it's a virtual assistant that's going to support you, or maybe it is time to make your first hire, or whatever it is. Although, virtual resources amazingly cost effective now and flexible. And so we essentially set up a call with them, and they walked through it. So that's the other important thing, is the temptation is, oh, I'll show them how to do it. But instead it's like, no, get them to follow it, because then when you spot them making a mistake or they've got a question, rather than you then just tell them and they have to remember it, instead you can update the guidance so that you never get that question again, never get that mistake again, whether it's them or another team member. And so we call that the prioritized document test cycle. You prioritize one specific process or activity that you want to hand over, document it in as high level as you can, but with the detail, but not all of it. It's often a tricky balance, but really you want to get to a point of testing it with real people that are going to run it. And what we found is that then after that next session, the account managers were able to take it. And now you've got a business owner that's freed up 15 hours per week because he's now not having to do it. And the really cool thing is, because I think for some people, they hear that story and go, oh, but then, I've still got to pay the account manager. And okay, so I'm freeing up 15 hours a week, and maybe I can justify that time will be worth more than the account manager because, I should be working more strategic things. But here's the real kicker. I asked this business owner, so what's been the biggest benefit of the work that we've done so far? And this was even within like 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, presumably it's the time that you've saved. And he said, no, it's the fact that previously when a customer asked for a quote, it would take me about 2 to 3 days. Whereas it takes an account manager less than an hour. Yeah. Now imagine the impact on conversion rate. If you send a request to 2 printing companies for a quote and one comes back within an hour and one takes 3 days, which one are you going with regardless on price, right? Yeah. And so as a result, even the increase in conversion pays for the people to be doing that 15 hours a week for him. And so I think that illustrates the key principle of getting really focused on a problem or something that's taking up the time, and get that documented, tested, handed over, because once you do that, it frees up time so that you can repeat that cycle. And the nice ending to that story is that business owner that started off working 60 hours a week now is no longer required day to day in the business.
Wow. I before I went solo, I basically, the last corporate job that I had was in the printing business, and I absolutely recognise some of those strains that you've just been talking about with that business owner, and I can see some of the potential flaws in that, with the account manager being also the shall we say the pricer. But having said that, it sounds like a very, very sensible thing to do, because they're already in touch with the client. And, as long as they've got a sort of a process in which to go through, what a great way of doing that. And so, yeah, I can see how you've made such an amazing impact for that particular owner. And is this what you're replicating for others when you're doing your coaching and so forth? Because Air Manual is really about helping people come into a business, isn't it? So in his case, you took an existing business and tweaked the kind of roadblock and smoothed it out so that he became less relevant to the business in a sense. But what your Air Manual, if I understand it right, is it's bringing people into a business that can actually help maybe do that anyway, and overcome that initial reluctance to do it. So can we go through what Air Manual can do for businesses? Because it's quite interesting, this.
Yeah, sure. So the reason that we created Air Manual, because as I've sort of alluded to, Air Manual isn't by any means my first business, but also I still have another software business, which is SpiderGap, which is a 360-degree feedback tool. I also have a consulting practice, but neither of those businesses require me day to day. I'm not operational in them. The business where I spend most of my time is, as you say, on Air Manual, and Air Manual is really solving a problem that we had ourselves when we were kind of like, myself and my business partner, as we were growing those businesses. We found these challenges around how do you delegate effectively? How do you get new team members up to speed and delivering value really quickly, particularly because the time that you need to hire is when you're busy. And so you don't then suddenly want to spend a load of time training someone when you're busy, because then that's when you get into the whole, it'll take longer to teach them than it will just do it myself. And so we wanted to turn that on its head. And so that's why we created Air Manual, because we realized that to be able to do that, to be able to create essentially checklists, interactive checklists that people could follow, like those account managers doing quotes, that they could follow step by step to get predictable outcomes, and do so in a way that feels natural and good, even enjoyable when you're going through it, because it's not clunky, it's not creating friction, but making it so user-friendly that you could even use it for new members of staff, even before they've joined the business officially, like for when in our businesses, but also for our clients, they will send out checklists to new employees after they've agreed a start date, right? Or agreed an offer. They'll say, hey, you've gone through this process. We think you'd be a really good fit for the organization. Hope you do too. As a result, we'd like to make you an offer. Here's the offer. Do you agree? Yes, great. Let's agree a start date. And at that point, they would then send them a checklist for how to get started, which includes completing your employment contract, NDAs, setting up your tools, all those sorts of things that need to be done even before day one. But for that to be possible, you need it to be really user-friendly and look good and low friction. And so that was kind of why we created Air Manual, was partly to solve our own problem. but also because I've got lots of friends who run businesses, and when they ask me, okay, how are you doing, Alexis? How are you doing this, Alexis? How are you documenting things? How are you doing this? I have to go, like, we're using this plus this plus this, but I wouldn't recommend you do that because it's going to be too complex for your team. And so we sort of solved that with AirManual. So with AirManual, you've got this really easy to use online software platform for documenting your processes, your guidance, your policies, your onboarding. You can even include training checklists, you can use it for forms. But the idea is that it creates one place that if you need to know how to do something in the organization, you can go there. And that's an important thing, because when you're managing, what we've found is that when you're managing people, you need to be able to set a realistic expectation that they go and follow the process. And you can't do that if you keep all of your documents in 12 different places as we used to. Because if you say, oh, Sally, you forgot to include VAT on this invoice. Did you follow the process? Oh, what process? It's like, well, we've got a process for sending invoices. Oh, have we? I didn't find it. And if that's a reasonable thing for Sally to say, then you're really going to struggle and get improved results and make sure that you're reducing mistakes and delegate effectively and onboard people and so on. Instead, that needs to be a weird thing for Sally to say. You need to go, well, yeah, like all of our processes are in one place, and you can just you could type in invoice and it will list all the processes that have got invoice in it. And there we are, send an invoice. And did you follow these steps? And when you can do that, it's not just great for the business leaders because they can hold people accountable and make sure they deliver, but it's actually great for the team as well. And we've seen that actually what team members really like is knowing what's expected from them and then being able to perform and do a good job.
I presume, Alexis, that it means also less face-to-face time with line management as well, so that you're freeing almost time from across the organisation to do other things. Because, what is it called? Sitting with Alice or so, whatever, effectively when you get in a new job, you got to go and sit with Doris or Alice or whoever it is in that organisation to sort of figure out what you do in certain areas, and you're jobbed around different departments.
Yeah.
In the expectation that you're going to remember it all, and all it does is create links to somebody who can help you if you're in a hole.
Completely agree. And as a result, when we start shining a spotlight on it, we realize how ridiculous it is. Yeah. And yet it's the most common way in which businesses are trying to onboard their team members, is exactly as you say, the shadowing. We'll bring them in, they can just watch how we do it, and they'll learn by osmosis. There's a brilliant Dilbert cartoon actually that talks about this, where the manager is showing the employee along, and the employee asks, so have you gotten some kind of onboarding training or program that I can go through? And the manager explains, oh no, we prefer just to you to just be around them, and you'll pick it all up by osmosis. And the employee says, I was stupid to come and work here. And the manager replies, see, you're getting it already.
That's brilliant. Where I can see, sorry, Alex, where I can really see this as a benefit is where you can't do that walking around and that osmosis because you're physically remote.
Yes, and indeed, my team are 100% remote. Although it's not to say that you couldn't do it, because you could do it through screen sharing. I could have, for example, new salespeople. I could have them shadow the calls of other team members, and I could have them shadow other things on those calls. However, in my experience, even that is not an effective use of time, because it is better for me to give a salesperson a recording of a call that has happened. That I can be sure that it demonstrates best practice, and then they're not going to pick up bad habits. B, they're able to consume it at their own pace, whether that means watching it on 2 times speed or going back over bits. Also, while it's happening, they can be looking at the checklist that we've got for example, how to run a discovery call with our customers. So they can follow along, go, oh, I see what they did there. And hang on, let me go back. How did they do this bit? And how did they know that? Oh yeah, they like all of that you can focus on the real goal, which is get that person trained and up to speed, rather than, oh yeah, let's just have them follow. And I think, and it's, yes, you can do it through recordings and you can give them checklists and so on. But a really good self-driven onboarding is about leading them through a sensible set of steps that mean that although that often when you're learning a new job, it's drinking from the fire hose, right? You're just learning so much all at the same time. Yeah. And so to some extent, you're just trying to make that a little bit easier on them and give them a sequence of things to learn, rather than if they're shadowing, they're learning everything all at once. They're learning about your products and services, your values, how to use the tools, how your sales process is, what their role is, all simultaneously, depending on who they happen to be sat with at that particular moment. And so it's a very slow way of people learning. And in our experience, it takes months for people to really get up to speed through that approach, and many, many hundreds of hours for the team to train them. Whereas when we do it this way, it takes single digit hours for the manager. In my case, for example, when I hire a new sales consultant into our team, it will take me about an hour of my time over their first week. And the powerful thing is, it's all value add. At no point am I spoon feeding them information. I'm having essentially a coaching discussion with them, or just checking in for 5 minutes, just check, how you doing, how you settling in, and so on. So they feel supported, welcomed, valued, engaged, without me having to spend what I previously would have done 20 hours in the first week.
Yeah. So actually what you said earlier is that wasn't something you were very good at. So basically you've almost developed the software to enable you to become good at that very thing.
Yeah, I always think it's great when you see business owners, or people who have done that. Have taken one of their biggest weaknesses and turned it into a strength. Partly because I think it can give others hope. Because if I could do it and I was terrible at it, even my manager told me I was terrible about it. So it wasn't just in my head. If I can overcome it, and I can do so by putting in the processes and the systems and so on to make it easy to do so. And I think that's the key. Like, if there's a quote from Peter Drucker, perhaps the father of management theory, which I shall paraphrase, which is that no institution, no organization can grow and build sustainably in the long term if it needs superhumans or geniuses to manage it. It must be able to be managed and to get along under a management team or a leadership team of average human beings. And so the thing I take from that is you have to make management easy. Because if you think, I just need to be a 10x manager, I need to improve my skills, that's lovely and great and has benefit. I'm not saying it doesn't have benefit, but it means that you're creating dependence on you and that set of skills. Yeah. Whereas, for example, we have a guidance document on how managers run one-to-ones with their team members on a weekly basis. It's got some bullet points on topics to cover that mean that our team feel really supported now, because they're asked questions like, so how's this week been for you overall? Or is there anything that's currently frustrating you about the day-to-day that I could help with? Or are there any blockers that are currently preventing you from achieving your goals? Those are all great questions that most managers wouldn't necessarily immediately think of if they weren't prompted to do so.
Air Manual has 3 tiers of pricing on the website: a starter and a team, and then on enterprise. Typically, presumably, people enter the starter, but the thing that's going through my mind is, how much does this get in the way of creativity? Does it get in the way of creativity, or are these two things so almost separate, in the sense that you have to have these things? You're making a really compelling case for Air Manual. It really is so black and white.
Thank you.
But then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, but every now and again, things go a little bit curved, and guess what? That gets us a huge amount of money. So I don't know. Is there some kind of almost restriction that it brings into an organization?
Great question. Love that question. So it's a really good point, and particularly for entrepreneurs who have got a mindset of they enjoy creativity, they enjoy energy, they enjoy often starting things, not necessarily finishing them, and as a result, they worry that won't structure reduce freedom, or structure reduces flexibility, or structure reduces creativity. The reality is that actually the opposite of structure is chaos. It's not the opposite of structure isn't freedom, it's chaos. And when you have chaos, you don't have freedom, you don't have creativity, because you don't have space. And that's what often the problem is for business leaders, is that they would love to have bigger impact on the world, on their teams, on their families and so on, but they don't have the space to do so. Either the space in their calendar, because often you just need time, or it's mental space. It's the fact that you're not firefighting. And we've worked with businesses where, if I think of one in particular who had grown from 18 employees to 42 employees in 18 months. So really, really fast growth. But I could see it in his eyes. So I asked the question, I said, "Are you enjoying it?" And he said, "No." And that breaks my heart, because I know that the reason that, he's trying to grow so that he gets to have an amazing impact and have an amazing life and business and so on. And yet, if anything, the growth is taking him further and further away from it. And why? It's because he hadn't got any structure at all. It was all chaos. Yes, huge, lots of flexibility and creativity, and we can do this and that and whatever, but there were no foundations being built upon. So it was all just sweat and blood that was fueling this engine. And it meant that his team were burning out. He was certainly burning out. And, a breath of wind could blow that business over. Whereas when you've got the structure in place, it gives you freedom for the creativity. For example, let's say marketing is an area where you need a lot of creativity, right? You need, to come up with new ideas and to do them in interesting ways that stand out. But let's say that you only ever did that. That would mean that even though you'd found something that worked, perhaps a particular way of doing campaign, you never commit that into processes that are done by people. And as a result, you're just constantly coming up with new stuff all the time and never building on it. Equally, you'll spend a load of time fixing mistakes. Like let's say that your particular funnel is, we've got content, which includes a podcast and some ebooks and all these sorts of things. And then we want people to fill in a form, and then we take them through a sales cycle. If you haven't got any structure around that, you create a new ebook, you create the form, but there were no processes of how to set it up. So the form's broken, it doesn't tag people in the right way. And as a result, they don't get the emails and you don't get the results. So you're spending a load of time being super creative and creating a brand new thing, but you haven't got the structure to make sure that you don't make the mistakes and as a result land it. Equally, if you've worked out that, when we advertise in this particular place, it works really well, you want that to be set up on repeat so that you're free to go and do the next thing, not have to constantly come back to it. And so, and we experience this in all areas, including software development is another area where you've got really smart people that need to bring creative problem solving to challenges, but it's really important to have processes for things like testing and software development life cycles so that they don't end up building something that doesn't match requirements, or that they build something that breaks the system, because ultimately that slows you down and reduces how much impact you can have.
If I work out the price of the service that you potentially could get into your service at, broadly speaking, it's 750 quid in a year, give or take, depending on the exchange rate, because you actually bill in dollars. Does that mean to say that your target market is dollars? I don't know whether you bill a UK organization.
Yeah, no, we support pounds, euros, or dollars. So as for a starter plan on pounds on an annual payment plan, works out as £708. So that's a starter plan that covers up to 5 team members. A team plan covers up to 10 team members. That's £1,428 a year. And we priced it in that way, partly because we wanted it to be a bit of a no-brainer, like the impact that you can have. And we've seen this over and over again when you put this in place in terms of even just reducing mistakes. Like I have easily made, it pains me to think about it, but I've easily made many tens, possibly hundreds of mistakes that have cost me thousands or even tens of thousands of pounds over the course of my business. And many of them could have been prevented by making sure that we had good processes in place. And I think most business owners can identify with that. When you get when you submit the wrong pricing, or you send an invoice and it's incorrect, or there's a key question that you miss as part of the sales process, the impact of those things, particularly when you scale that across the whole business, becomes easily in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so even if you take that, never mind the other stuff we've talked about freeing up the business owner or onboarding people in days rather than months, the order impact is really huge, but that speaks to the fact that our number one core value is focus on impact. That's what, to some extent, I think of my role as being a collector of stories of how we get people from like stressed and overwhelmed and getting to a business that they love and can grow and help them achieve the goals.
So are you effectively the British Russell Brunson?
Well, so Russell does with ClickFunnels, he's all about how to create landing pages with funnels to attract your customers. Whereas, of course, we focus on the internal side. How does your business then deal with the many tens of thousands of leads and customers that you've got coming in? So perhaps I can partner with Russell there and pick up where his system leads off.
No, it wasn't so much about his software, so much as about his role in your respective companies, in the sense that you're the storyteller.
Yeah, I think increasingly so, and I think partly, well, to a large extent, because I enjoy it. I really enjoy going and talking to people, like this conversation with you. Like, I love talking to people about what's possible. Partly because I've been the other side of that. The audience. I've been sat there thinking, how the hell do I do this? And being in a situation where I'm not able to grow the business beyond just me, being in a situation where I've got team members that I'm struggling to train them and get them up to speed, being in a situation where I've got team members that are joining the organization and leaving too quickly because I don't have this stuff in place. And I'm a big reader. I've read so many books on how to build your business, whether it's Traction or eMyth or Clockwork or Scaling Up and Good to Great and Effective Manager and all these fantastic books out there. But I found that in general, none of them told me how to make documenting and delegating easy and sustainable. And that was the big shift that happened in our business really back in 2018 that changed everything. And that's what I love now, helping others to see how to do.
Kevin and I have got small businesses. Kevin works in a different type of business part-time as well. But those small businesses, it's still worth, because I recognise some of the mistakes I've made, and my wife will slap me over the head every now and again saying, well, it would be helpful if you had processes, Graham.
Yeah.
And it's like, shut up and go back to the kitchen. But no, I don't.
She's problematic of leverage.
They're in 1950s house, the Arrowsmiths.
Well, yeah, I was born in the 50s, so I can get away with it. Sorry. No. I'd never say that to my wife. I'd want to, but no, seriously. But I do make these mistakes, and it's the little things that leverage so much cost. You forgot to whatever. I mean, I do deal with print, so just getting that bit wrong. Yeah. And having to redo things or postal rates or whatever, all kinds of different issues that you can get seriously wrong, and it costs you. This very thing goes on. The bigger the organization, the bigger that problem comes. Bound to be. I know full well that if I've got to take cost out of a process for a reasonable sized company, putting management consulting hat on, first place to look is to say, well, where are the errors?
Yes.
Okay. Because if things go through the process the way they're supposed to do, it happens quickly, it happens easily, and you've got volume, you've got economies of scale. Chances are, if, say, you get something wrong, payroll, classic, you get a pay slip wrong, well, it takes you normally a hugely disproportionate amount of time to investigate it and to put it right. Yeah, so if you get rid of the mistakes, then you save a lot of money.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so smart. And I think one of the traps that I think business leaders fall into is they think, well, I can't eliminate all mistakes. There'll always be some mistakes. And that is true. There will, but you don't have to repeat them.
Exactly. There'll always be mistakes. Make sure there are as few as possible.
It's like back when I was a management consultant working on processes with large businesses. I remember being taught lean and how that was used in the manufacturing sector initially, and then brought into all sorts of other industries. And I remember a particular concept from lean, which was the concept of stopping the line, which was if you've got a big manufacturing line of cars and you identify a problem. So let's say that you're putting in the windscreen and it doesn't quite fit, or it's got a crack, not just going, oh, well, I can probably just unscrew this and put that in. I can make it work. Instead, stopping the line so that you could go back and work out why did that mistake happen, put in a preventative measure that means it'll never happen again, and then restart the line. And I think that's such a smart approach to mistake management, essentially, is rather than work around the mistake or fix the mistake, like the payroll example that you gave there, Kevin, is to instead say, well, actually, how could this have even happened in the first place? What was the process that we went through that led to this, and what could we put in place that means that doesn't happen again? And I think business leaders underestimate how quickly, when you repeat that process a few times, that you reduce mistakes from being frequent and every day, and you spend most of your time as a leader or manager firefighting, to actually mistakes become infrequent, rare even, and that actually you spend very little of your time fixing those kinds of problems, just because of it sort of compounds. So I think, it's really, really smart, Kevin.
One of the questions I have about Air Manual is how many people sign up to your business on the basis that I am a few years away from selling the business. This is a smart move, isn't it, to spend a few thousand quid on this service, because actually I've got something to sell at the end of it.
Yeah, it is. It's a really interesting one. So we do have customers that have done that exact thing, and some who have then sold their businesses. And I know from there's a great guy, Ken Gorman, who wrote the book Selling Your Business: A Fast Track to Understanding the Process of Selling. And it's a really good business for kind of giving you the how do you do it, but B, what's going to impact the value. Yeah. And he talks essentially about sort of 5 big levers to what's going to either increase or decrease the value of your business. And one of those 5 is documented processes. And he estimates that the value of your business is affected to the tune of about 20%, whether or not you've got those processes in place. Yeah, absolutely. And that's because for someone who's acquiring a business, their confidence that the business is going to be successful on an ongoing basis requires that they have to believe that the activities that generate cash flow currently will continue to happen in future. And for that to happen, having documented processes makes a big difference, because, for example, it means that if the business leader leaves and actually they were doing a load of the really important stuff, at least if it's documented, then you know that you can just resource that role and it gets done. Or if when you buy the business, some of the key people leave, which does happen, knowing that actually they're not taking all that knowledge out with them and that you'll still be able to run the business is really important. And so I think, as Ken says, like, easily adds 20% to the value of your business. So that means that if you've got a business that is worth 2 million and you haven't documented your processes, you're leaving £400,000 on the table by not having that in place.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, thank you for that. The worry I would have in some ways is that you're an advertising agency, got it all mapped out. And what happens in advertising agencies? Well, they clear off and create another advertising agency, which has got all these fantastic processes that just came to them in a flash, because maybe they've got, I don't know, hold of Air Manual's version for the first agency. Is that a worry?
I think normally people who are acquiring businesses are pretty astute in these sorts of matters. So I'd expect that their agreements as part of the sale would prevent competition in those sorts of ways, because I mean that happens when people even leave jobs, right? I've seen examples of people who have literally got folders with files from previous jobs and whatever. That shouldn't happen. No. Unfortunately, it does. I think it's really important, actually, by the way, as business owners, that we should actively discourage and push that away. Because although I think for some the temptation is like, oh, well, what's the problem with them if they've brought those things? That's on them. I think the problem is it creates an ethical sliding slippery slope, really, because it means that, well, if you're willing to accept that into your business, then you can't then expect your employees to operate in an ethical way. So we're known as being very straight-laced in our approach to business, which I'm sure holds us back versus some, but I think works better in the long run. So But anyway, I'm off topic.
No, I'm not. Because I'm not suggesting for a moment that you have a back door for people. I just basically mean that is that by actually having a very clear understanding of the way in which a business works, then it potentially creates vulnerability with senior people taking that and moving it somewhere else.
That's interesting, because I hadn't actually thought about the fact that having a process is documented on a system like AirManual actually reduces the likelihood of that happening. Because if you've got all of your processes documented, say in Word documents in folders, that's actually really easy to email to yourself or put into a zip file or whatever. Whereas that isn't easy in AirManual. Like why would you? You've got them all online. You can go there. And so whilst in theory you could print off each one as a separate PDF and so on, which is important in a business to have some of your key processes available in another form in case internet goes down, for example. You don't want your what do we do in case internet fails process to be on the internet only. But there isn't a way in AirManual to, for example, download the whole thing to a zip drive and walk out the building with it. So actually, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that AirManual actually reduced the risk of people walking out with your process.
Well, free consultancy from the next 100 days. Again, what can I say?
Well, absolutely, Graham. We'll have to send
hugely appreciate it. Thank you.
No, don't worry. It's you also have a podcast, don't you?
Yes, De-Stress Your Business. I've kind of talked a bit about some of the pains that we've had along the way, kind of growing the business. And I mean, being an entrepreneur is tough. There's no getting away from it. And there's not a single business owner that would say, oh, actually, it's a pretty easy ride or a DOS. It is tough, but can be hugely rewarding, both in terms of the freedom and some of the financials. But actually, I think most entrepreneurs would say it's the impact that you can have. It's the ability to grow and the flexibility and all that kind of stuff. I think that is exciting, but it is stressful. And I think the problem, like I was talking about before, for you to have a great impact, for you to get to do the things that you want to do in your business, you need space. You need mental space. You need space in your calendar. And to do that, you need to reduce that stress. And so that's why we set up the podcast. So in that podcast, we've got episodes that go really deep into specific issues, like, how do you get lots of candidates applying for a role, or how do you manage when you've got multiple people that have gone through a recruitment process that could go for the role, but you've only got one that you can hire right now. How do you keep the others nurtured so that you've got other team members available later on? Or how we've been doing some recently about how to take advantage of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and not get overwhelmed by the huge amount of both opportunities and risks that presents. Because I think, running a business is so stressful. There's no need to make it more, and so we aim to make it considerably less so by providing people the kind of resources and guidance to.
Well, I think we both know about that, Graham.
Yeah, we do, and Alexis, you've been an absolutely brilliant first-time guest on the next 100 Days podcast. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Graham, I'm really, really excited about what we just talked about. And documenting processes sounds a really, really boring thing. But if you've got a tool that actually makes it easy and actually allows you as well to delegate stuff to other people and free some of your time up, that's got to be something worth looking at.
It does. You can't help but think that Alexis has actually honed in on one of the most productive things a business that's kind of started. I'm not 100% sure that an absolute startup business would naturally think it through that way, but they might do. But for a business that's actually started, like yours, mine, etc., I would think that this would be an extremely good investment to actually document the things that you're doing. Maybe one of the questions is how long is it going to take? But hey, it's going to be there. You'll actually do it over time, and it will set, like the printing example, you will see a big improvement.
Yeah, and I think just getting stuff documented, isn't just freeing up your own time. It's avoiding errors happening, which can cost a lot of money. And it's thinking about that business valuation at the end and just getting yourself uncoupled from the business. Let's face it, the one thing that stops a lot of businesses being sold is because it's not the business owner that's selling themselves. The business owner wants to sell the business. Yeah. So you've got to uncouple business owner from business.
I honestly, his market is so wide. He's onto something. Genuinely, it's something of interest. And I think many people will see this and they'll go on to talk to Alexis about working with him, because it is such an important thing to do, and in an easy way to do it as well.
Yeah.
So today, it's been absolutely fantastic having Alexis Kingsbury on the Next 100 Days podcast. I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
And I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.